Hey, meaningful movers. Welcome back to Moving With Me in the podcast, where actions have meaning, words have meaning, and we open up the conversations to discover what's your next move. I'm your host, Krystal. In today's episode, we are going beyond the zodiac. How well do you really know yourself? And how does that help with interactions with others? But you know how it is and what we do. We need to set that theme, so let's go ahead and do that. The word of the day is instinct. This is your unlearned pattern of behavior, thinking, and feeling. Your natural desires can impact who you are and be a pretty good indicator of how well you mesh with others. Talk about matchmaking. And that's enough of me talking. How about we introduce our guest? And there's no one better to do that than himself. Eric, why don't you give the people a bit of background about yourself and what you're going to share with us today?
My name's Eric G. I wrote a book called The Power of Personality that came out this year. Based on the personality typing methodology that I've been developing over the course of my career as a writing coach and a life coach. I also owned an education company for a decade, and that's really where a lot of the nitty gritty took place in terms of like testing, examining, and understanding kids better. I think overall it should help everyone understand themselves better, most importantly, and maybe the people around them as well, and understand maybe why you're getting into arguments or why you get along, depending on who you're interacting with.
I like the vibe aspect of this, so we're going to keep riding that wave. So, life coach and writing coach, how does that work out?
I started as a writing coach, right? My background is in screenwriting. I was also an English major, so my writing background is like my academic background. But what ended up happening is I was trying to teach people how to write. It turned out that finding their voice seemed to me the most important aspect of that. And I developed that over time. I didn't know that. Gosh, I wish I had known that right away. But I was like, oh, that's the hard part, is like everyone needs to find their voice. And that's hard. The way we find our voice is finding ourselves. So it just turned out that my hobby, which was understanding personality, came to match with my professional life. And I decided to start using that personality typing at a professional level and helping people find themselves.
For sure. And that's interesting how you said that, is teach people how to find themselves, to almost speak. That's the way I look at it when you said find your voice. You don't necessarily attach that to writing. So dig a little bit deeper on what that means to find your voice through writing.
Everyone always focuses on grammar at first. I think it's because people don't know, right? I think we focus on what we don't know. I used to coach high school basketball as well. And I think when you're just starting out, I think the first thing that people think about is how do you shoot the ball? I want to focus on shooting because that's all I see on television, when in fact, every coach knows like the first three things you work on are passing, dribbling or ball handling, and defense. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same thing with writing. Like that's our core, is our voice, right? It's how we express ourselves. And, everyone's going to do it differently. Grammar is a specific set of rules. It changes over time, and it really changes on the person. And what is allowed really depends on the viewership, right? If someone's reading your thing and they don't like it, then write differently, And if they do, then you're on the right track, right? And I think if you do that over the course of time, you start realizing and gaining confidence in the way you express yourself. I think in terms of finding ourselves, we need to find out what we really want, because if we don't know that, then we don't know who we are. And if we don't know who we are, how do we truly know we're expressing our true self when we write?
Oh, I like that. And you're so right about English or just grammar. It pivots so much because of context, because of how you're using it. And you can create so many different analogies. I felt like I struggled in English, and it wasn't so much that I knew what a period was. I knew what an exclamation point, I knew what a contraction was and things like that. But I wrote I'm trying to think of the word, parabolic, I guess, maybe. So a lot of the things that I wrote, they had a lot of analogies to it. It went so much deeper when you're giving that to an English teacher. And you're writing a paper to an English teacher and you're like in 8th grade, 7th grade. They're kind of like, where are you going with this? What are you like? I didn't ask all that. I'm answering it in a way that is meaningful to me. I had to take a step back because it was like, okay, you're right. I need to write towards the audience. And that's what I really tell my kids and anyone who's even in English, where they have that same frustration of just being misunderstood with their writing. I would always say, you need to focus on who you're writing to. So if the teacher receives information a certain way, and you know that, do not try to force them to read it the way that you want it to be read, because it's not a proper match. And you're so good at what you do, you can transition your tone of voice, you can transition the narrative to make sure that it's pleasing to her and satisfying to her, because at the end of the day, she's giving you the grade, right? And I'm like, just do it for the grade. You're not losing yourself in this. You know what I mean? Save it when you're out on your own and you're in a space where it's conducive to that. So that's interesting, which then leads me to the next piece of this, because I just mentioned about elementary and me writing. That's how I do when I talk about it with my kids. Like, that's how I make the transition for them to not feel that they're staunching their creativity because they have to change it to please their audience. But how do you teach people, or if anything, kids, how to write? What would be your advice in a similar scenario?
You know, like I always say, the dirty little secret is that I think a large majority of English teachers aren't really the greatest at teaching writing. And because most English teachers were English majors, and as an English major myself, they don't really teach you how to write. Like, you don't work on the craft, you work on, studying literature and analyzing on all that. And it's like, well, no, unless you have a specialization in creative writing or screenwriting, you're not really working and looking at writing as a craft. I've had students go, can I sound more scholarly? And I'm like, what does scholarly mean? Exactly. Like, what is that? I think in their minds, they have this idea of how people think, or they think they should be writing and how they should be sounding. I'm like, when's the last time you've read a scholarly paper for fun? So the way I teach kids how to write is mainly I just try to figure out something that they're interested in and have a strong feeling about, and having them express that. So the example I always give is I often help with college essays, right? And that's a perfect time to teach writing, because college essays tend to focus a lot on, the person expressing yourself, right? Who are you? They tend to be autobiographical. I had a student, I believe the prompt was something along the lines of, how do you address adversity, or how do you face adversity in your life? So he's like, hey, should I write about this time when, like, a year ago, I wasn't doing that well in chemistry, and then I worked really hard, then I improved my chemistry grade. And I started snoring because I was like, no one wants to read that. Come on. Do you want to talk about your chemistry? I'm like, tell me about a time that you really felt pain in the last 2 years, like emotional pain. And he's like, well, I like this girl, and I finally got the courage to ask her out because she was a friend. And I finally asked her out, and then she rejected me, and then she ghosted me. And I was like, that's great. Not great that it happened to you, but that's great to write about, because that's something that you clearly feel something for, and people are going to be able to connect to that. Because I tell you what, you don't think that adult reading your essay has ever had that happen to them before? You don't think they've ever felt rejection? And so let's write about that. And that's what he did. And it was a great story. It was a great essay. And I think that's like the key for me, is like helping kids, and just people in general, not just kids, understand that our stories are interesting if we really connect to how we felt about them. Because if we do, then that's going to connect with the people that are listening.
Man, that was kind of deep. Well, one, I'm pretty sure if he was like talking to a psychologist or something like that, he would not have revealed that openly like that. Personally, I don't think anyone would just immediately go, boom, that's what happened to me. I found that immediately traumatic. But how you spoke with him about it, it was so approachable, it was so welcoming, and it was so non-judgmental. Like, I'm not going to sit here and diagnose you after this. I'm not going to sit here and try to like have you break that down or anything. I'm just saying, if that is something that happened, then you write your story about it and you keep it. It'll only be for you for right now. But once you finish reading it and writing it, and then you turn it in, it's going to be so much powerful. So I think it's therapeutic in a way as well, the way that you approach that. That was very good.
Yeah, I think I just try to help them by letting them understand that not to take life too seriously, but to also feel it seriously, like to really get deep in there, but also don't self-reflect too much where you forget to like actually move forward and live your life, right?
For sure. So you mentioned something about it takes a lot of work to get to know yourself. What does that mean?
Yeah, it takes a lot of work just to want to do that work, right? I think most personality types are not the most self-reflective, which is not terrible. If you navel gaze too much, then you're not really going to be able to like move on with your life and actually do things. So part of it's like convincing people that it's important, which the writing angle is kind of nice, because I think people will do things to get stuff done. So especially with college essays, I can get students to like really open up because there's a purpose to it. They're like, okay, if this is helping me give the best possible essay so I can like go to a good school or whatever, then I'm down with it, right? And I think that's the first step, is like being willing to understand the importance of it and that it has a purpose aside from just like self-reflection. And then once you get there, then, I start working on using the personality types that I wrote about in my book. And that's kind of where we get started, really.
Great lead into that. Before we jump, I wanted to say something. I know you're an English major because of how you just pronounced important.
Oh, how did I pronounce? I didn't
I don't know. It was like
recommend.
important. It was very.
Oh,
You
enunciated?
pronounce
Did I
every.
enunciate?
Yes, very.
Important. Oh, I didn't realize that. Sometimes I don't. Like I'll like murmur over words sometimes, but yeah, I don't know why I
No,
did that. Yeah.
no, it was good.
Yeah.
I caught it.
Oh.
It was. I mean, I'm just teasing you, but
Oh.
oh yeah. So you went about personality kind of whole hog. The way I looked at it, you created your own archetypes and everything. So I don't even want to give it away. You tell me about your personality type process and your approach and all the goodness involved in it.
Yeah, like it started from, researching, and researching sounds terrible because that sounds boring. It really wasn't that. I mean, I was having a lot of fun with it. It's like reading about horoscopes, right? Like it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read a lot about personality types, the MBTI or Myers-Briggs, which is the one that a lot of people know. And I just kind of started developing it from there. And so my personality typing methodology uses 4 packs. There are 4 main packs of people, and each one of those packs has a different core value. And then from there, there are 4 animal types within each of the packs. So 4 times 4 is 16. So there are 16 different animal personality types. And I use animals because I think it's very easy for people to remember. People like them. Even if they don't like their animal, they'll at least go, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, gosh, I want to be a shark. I wish I was a shark, And so I think that's easy to remember. Yeah, focusing on the values is really important because most of the other assessments use external factors, and not to say that mine doesn't, but it's more about why someone does something versus what they're actually doing. I think it's more important, like, why do they do it? Because I think we have a lot of people who do the same thing, but they do it for very different reasons. And I think that reason is what determines like their personality type and who they really are.
Wow. Yeah. Why did they do that? Ooh, that was good. And I had meant to take your personality test before we had this interview. I really did. But how do you really know yourself? You said you had an example where you knew someone who took a personality test and came back with, I'm this type of archetype. I'm this type of animal. And you're like, nah, that's not how you are.
Yeah, people hate that. People hate when I say that.
What is it about that?
It's because I think sometimes we think we know ourselves better. We know the information about us best, obviously, because we've lived our entire life with ourselves. But we don't sometimes know what distinguishes us because we just assume everything is like, oh, I think strategically, of course, but it's like, well, do you compare to another person? I think we don't know what distinguishes us until we stand next to someone where it clearly does, right? This person was a friend of mine, and I think I asked her what she got, and she was like, I'm an owl. That's one of my personality types, is an owl. And I'm like, no, you're not that. And I laughed, and she's like, what are you talking about? What am I? And I'm like, you're a peacock. And she's like, what? A peacock? Why am I a peacock? And I'm like, because peacocks are loud. And she's like, I'm not loud, and I'm like, and then she's like, okay, I am loud. But, there's more to me than that, right? And I'm like, yes, there is more to you than that, but loudness is very easy for me to see. And I started talking to her about, like, owls are strategists. And she's like, I use strategy. And I'm like, when's the last time you played chess? And she's like, chess? Well, that doesn't mean I'm like, all I know is that most owls are going to play chess at least one moment in their life because that's just something that's really interesting to them. And then when I started to describe an owl, she's like, oh, yeah, I would never do that. And I'm like, well, yeah, there are people out there in the world who actually do that. And I think that's the problem. We can be so into how we view things, we forget that there are tons of different people out there who view things entirely differently. And instead of us being right and they're being wrong, it's more like, no, they're just different and they have different values. And then it's great because you start comparing yourself to other people in a good way and going, oh, this is what makes me kind of special. And then you're going to find people who are like you. And you're like, oh, okay, so I am special, but I'm also not alone. There are people that I can share a lot of these different feelings with. And I think that's great too.
For sure. Okay, if you could identify, what animal would I be, do you think? Just on our brief conversation now and before.
I feel like I've been making this guess a lot, which is not like totally wrong because, I mean, oftentimes it's dictated by the things that we do, right? I know I said that you should also know the why, but oftentimes if things are fairly specific, then you can kind of guess like, okay, this tends to be the reason why. Can I ask you one question?
Please, yeah.
Like, why did you start your podcast?
Oh my God. Okay, I'm going to see if I can do this as short as I possibly can. I was with a friend. She asked me to do a podcast with her. As we were doing it, we just had mismatched ways of how we saw the vision of the podcast going, and how we were working together wasn't conducive whatsoever. So we ended up stopping the podcast, but I found myself like really enjoying speaking to myself, speaking to others about pretty deep topics. I said, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to kind of do it from a, like, to help promote my book kind of thing. And then it just started taking a life of its own. That's in an essence of how it started. It wasn't my idea, but I got introduced it to help out another friend. And then I ended up finding myself liking it.
Oh, that's so okay. I based on that, I mean, I could be wrong, but definitely, I think I know your pack. Your pack definitely sounds very shamanic, especially because it's like a self-improvement podcast, right? And the way you're talking about things, like, I mean, that sounds very like a shaman. And if I had to guess based on that answer, I'm going to guess too, like a baboon or a humpback whale. No?
Oh my God. I'm going to write these down.
Did I not?
No, I don't know. I'm going to write down.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, you haven't taken the test. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, that ruins. Well, okay, then maybe I could be wrong. But actually, then again, I always say, like, sometimes the test is wrong, right? Tests are cookie cutter. Like, I'm not saying that I'm always right, but I think the best thing is for you to, like, read the actual description and like go, oh, okay, yeah, that resonates with me. And then read others within that pack, right? Because the only thing is, like, the packs are going to be somewhat similar. So I think if I said, like, oh, baboons are like this, then you might be like, oh, yeah, that's great. That matches. But then that also might just be me saying shaman stuff, because the shamans are like the major pack and baboons are just one of those types. So baboons are like the voice. So the fact that you said, oh, I really like speaking to people and using my voice, that's a very baboon trait, versus the humpback whale is more like the soul of the village. So once again, if you had a shaman, if it was a baboon shaman, then they'd be like the one who would project the ideas, project the vision, and the humpback whale would be the soul, like the one who just kind of encapsulates that. So they can be similar, but different.
Yeah. I'm going to take it, and then I'm going to reach out to you and let you know, hey, this is what it is. And I'll let y'all know, too, what happened on that.
Yeah, you're definitely a shaman. If you don't get a shaman, then there's something wrong with my test. But,
okay.
Yeah. Even though there could be once again, tests are not infallible. Tests are just tests. I wrote the book so that it could teach people to be the test. Because the book is basically goes through the methodology pretty much. Not in a boring way, by the way. I make a lot of fun stories. It's all a lot of anecdotes. I like to use that to kind of express my ideas and demonstrate the ideas. A lot of pop culture references. So it is fun. It's a fun read, but it will teach you to be the test so that you can be able to read other people and yourself better.
Well, I mean, go ahead and tell me about the book. How to teach people to read people. Is that it?
It's The Power of Personality. I think that's probably the most important thing for people to remember. And it's basically a book on how to understand ourselves and the people around us better. And like I mentioned before, it basically, we seek to find our core value and discover that first, because I think that's the thing that we assume the people around us and the people in the world share that value, when in fact, it's very different. So I think sometimes you're like, oh yeah, family first. It's like, yeah, but it's like, how do you value family? Because a lot of people value their family differently. And the easiest way to see that is you just look at a bunch of different parents. How do they parent? Their parenting styles are going to be different. And generally it's going to be based on a different kind of value, right? Some parents are going to want their kids to like explore, and they're kind of just push their kid off the diving board, right? And into the pool. And because they're like, no, I want them to have that like freedom and be able to like take chances, right? And that person is going to be very different than the one who's constantly telling their kids to be careful, and then make sure that they have their lunch prepared and all those kinds of things. It's a very different kind of value, and that dictates what we do, basically.
Now that you're saying that, I wonder if that translates to work environment. So just giving those two, same one is more of an autonomy way, and then the other is more of a micromanage overseer, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that would translate to work?
Yeah, no, I mean, we see it a lot, especially in work, right? I guess work is like, what do they say? It's like going to driver's ed or going on jury duty, where you actually really do see a bunch of your peers that you haven't really chosen, right? They're just like, oh, I'm here. Yeah. And I guess I got that too with my education company, right? Because we were working with kids in the public school system, and that's everybody, right? It's like you're just going to get a wide swath of personality types, right? It's not going to be like, oh, specific types of kids. I guess like depending on the school, maybe if you have like a very specialized high school, then you might get a different kind of personality. But for the most part, different personalities. And we find that in the workforce, So micromanaging obviously has a negative connotation. That's a pejorative, right? But there is that sense, like managers tend to fit into one type because safety and security are very important to them. Organization and order give us a feeling of security, right? Like there's a process, it's a proper one. We follow it because it works. If it doesn't, then we work to improve that process. And then once we improve that process, then we follow that process because it works. you know?
Yeah.
But that person who reevaluates the process and maybe designs a new one might be very different than the person who maintains it, right? Like, I think those are
Oh.
two different things. You know, on a basketball team, you got the person who, you know, that's your score. You maybe have a couple scorers, right? The person you depend on to, like, you know, carry the offense. But then you got some enforcers, at least in the old NBA they used to, where those are the guys who are there to, like, you know, make sure that you don't mess with the other team and keep their other teammates safe, right? I think we all have different roles. And I definitely think we find that in work. And ideally, we can find the roles that fit us best and make us happy. Because generally, if we're doing something that we're good at and that we naturally gravitate towards, then we're going to be happy. You know, you don't want the person who wants safety and security to be in a role where they have to take enormous amount of risks because, you know, that's just going to stress them out their entire life.
This is so cool. What's the difference between your process and Myers-Briggs?
There are a lot of differences, but the one I always mention, because it's kind of the one that people know and can recognize the most, is the introvert extrovert argument. I think a lot of times that's like something that people read a lot because they're like, oh, introvert, there's a book on introversion. I'm shy, I'm reserved, I don't really like talking. So they automatically gravitate to that. And then, of course, the book's going to tell them how great they are. You know, which I'm also, that's not the method that I like to use, telling people how great they are, because then they're willing to believe anything, right? Like, I always focus on the negative. Because the negative, if you focus on that, you're never going to mistype someone in that they're never going to claim a negative trait that doesn't really match them. They'll only claim negative traits that are accurate. They're like, oh yeah, you know, I guess I am a little like rigid sometimes. Like, but you never have the spontaneous person ever saying, oh yeah, I'm rigid sometimes, because they know. But if you tell them all the great things, then everyone's going to say yes to that, regardless of whether it matches them or not. So that's part of my methodology. But especially the introversion, extroversion, I don't totally believe in that, because I think it's contextual, right? I think we're a lot more outgoing if we're really inspired by our situation, and we're a lot more reserved if we really don't care, right? So I always say the same person who's extroverted, and I'm putting that in air quotes, like who is willing to go in front of people and preach, right, about something they should really, really feel inspired by, is not the same kind of extroversion as a person who does body shots in Cabo. You know, those are because they're motivated by different things. They have a different core value. I think that's a big difference with my typing versus Myers-Briggs, is I think we might read that person as the same if you're looking at MBTI. People might just go, oh yeah, they're both extroverted. So yeah, they're pretty similar. I'm like, no, they're very different.
Yeah, very good. You add some depth to this. As you go through each one of these, do you work with that particular individual, like after they've gotten typed or typecasted? Do you kind of follow up with them and work through and kind of discuss the different values or characteristics?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think each personality type has its own kind of growth arc. So clearly when I'm working with people, not that we're ever at the end of our growth arc, but because we can constantly learn more and more about ourselves. But I have a growth arc in mind with each student based on their personality type. And so a lot of the things that I'll have them do, like the assignments I'll have to give them, are geared towards that. So if I have a type that values safety and security, I know that their growth arc is about being able to take a few more risks, being able to like evaluate their life and figure out that the things that they think are safe and secure aren't exactly that safe and secure, and kind of moving outside the box. But you have to do that with them in a way that makes them feel safe still, right? Like you can't just like, I always say they live in a bubble, but it can be a very big bubble. We can expand that bubble to be extremely large, and bubbles are safe. But if you try to do it too quickly, then the bubble pops and then you've lost all trust, right? So I think that would be an example of one personality type where I'd be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do with them. Versus another personality type where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the exact opposite with you because you don't have that issue, but you have this issue. And I think once I establish that, then we kind of work towards that goal of improvement.
There's just so much that goes on into this. I think that's a great way to just start. It's like you create a starting point, and then it's a plan. It's really cool. I mean, I think that's brilliant, to be quite frank. So I want to end on a fun note. You suggested for everybody, when you take this test, have a friend take it for you and see if the outcome matches. Why?
Yeah, so I've been going back to that one example about the friend who thought they were an owl. I told her, have a friend take it for you, you know? And then then she's like, oh, they got peacock. I'm like, yeah, because they're not going to know you better, but they're going to be able to know what makes you stand out more. So I often tell people, have a friend take it for them as opposed to, like doing it yourself.
That's pretty cool. I never thought to consider that, and I hope my listeners will consider that.
Yeah, especially your parents. Have your parents say it, because they have no problem saying what's
Ooh,
wrong with you, right? Like, that's what I say.
yes.
Like, you need someone to talk about your flaws, have a parent do it. They know.
That would be interesting. Yeah, that would be actually pretty good.
And parents, I mean, sometimes parents can be difficult because they will see themselves in their kids and try to push that on them.
Oh.
So that can be a problem. I think it would be like adult, when you're an adult child, I guess, or an adult
Yeah.
kid with adult parents, obviously, then ask them, because then, they'll know your flaws, especially or look at videotapes. If you have, videotapes, God, that's like such an old term. I'm
Yes.
dating myself. Yes. Look at video footage. I don't even know the right term now, of you as a child, because I used to type myself incorrectly because I thought I was something that I wasn't. And then I looked back at home videos when I was a kid, like even 4 or 5 years old. And I was like, oh, okay, no, I guess I am this. Unfortunately, I am this personality type, because it's pretty clear based on how I'm acting here. I'm obnoxious. So definitely ask your parents. Your parents won't hold back generally.
Well, you gave me a whole lot to consider and think about and ponder the rest of this day on. This is very good. You left us hanging and wanting more. So y'all pick up that book. But Eric, I tell you what, you had some great conversation here. Do you have any golden nuggets that you want to add some ketchup just to recap?
I think this might be cliche and people hear it, but I think people always need to hear it again just to give people courage to do it, is find out who you really are and then what you really love, and then go for that, right? Because I think oftentimes we spend our lives, in the words of Thoreau, living lives of quiet desperation. Especially if you're in America, I think we are fairly fortunate here that we often have that luxury to be able to kind of like at least take the time to explore. So let's take advantage of that and figure that out and pursue that.
For sure. Well, that's the episode today. Sometimes the lines blur between who we are and who we think we are or want to be. That's equally as important, as it takes account of your current state and what you are working towards. I mean, just being aware of how you feel and behave can drastically improve your well-being. Seriously, there are certain personalities that I can only interact with for 30 minutes in a single day or a week. It can be that disruptive to my mood. Meanwhile, there are others that I can talk to for hours. We just mesh really well. This is true even in the workplace. Indeed, it does take some work to really come to terms with who we are. It certainly helps when you add some fun to it. This take on personality is most certainly creative. Developing your own personality archetypes? Who does that? I'll tell you who. Eric. Are you interested in learning more about who you are? Or better yet, have someone else take the test for you and see what comes up. I love it all, and so will someone else. Before I let you go, Eric, why don't you go ahead and remind the people who you are, where they can find your resources or reach out to you.
You can find me at utopiaproject.com, where you can take the test. That's YOU, like YouTube. And if you want to learn more about my life coaching and my writing coaching, you can flip that around and find me at Project Youtopia, YOU, projectutopia.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure to include all of Eric's resources and connections in the episode description, as well as on my website's resources page, movingwithmeaning.com. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show, Moving With Meaning the podcast, and tap that alert bell so you know when these episodes drop. I am on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Please share, like, repost, and follow. Tag someone. We are creating a community here. Quick housekeeping before you go. Follow me on Instagram at movingwithmeaning82 and on Pinterest at author KB Clark. Also, connect with me on LinkedIn. I do dabble in TikTok at Krystal B. Clark. My Etsy store has some handy-dandy digital downloads. Lastly, run over to my YouTube channel and have a look or two. Links are in the episode. Alrighty, I'm Krystal on Moving With Meaning the podcast, reminding you to take it one step at a time. All moves have meaning. Check y'all later.